Think about a time when you've lost a loved one. Think about a time when a family member has passed away. Now, this is a tragic event, but everybody in this hall has experienced this some way or another. Whether it's your father, your mother, whether it's an uncle, an auntie, grandparents, siblings, children, relatives, cousins, we've all lost someone, right? Just think about for a moment, take yourselves back to the moment that you found out that that person has left this world, right? The moment the news was broken to you that your father, for example, has died. The emotions that you go through, the journey of grief that you take, the moment you find out, it's a journey that the moment you hear this devastating news, you feel like your world has come to an end. You feel like you cannot continue any longer, right? You feel like this is it. This is the worst thing that could ever happen to me. I don't know how I am going to continue. A lot of people faint when they hear the tragic news of the passing away of a relative. A lot of people go into months of depression when they hear that I have lost a loved one that was close to me, a blood relative or even a friend, anybody that you have spent time with in your life. But one thing you will notice is that as the days progress, your grief begins to decrease. Doesn't matter who that person is. It could be your father, but 6 months after your father's tragic news of his death has passed, 6 months later, I ask you, do you feel the exact same way that you felt when you initially heard that your father had passed away? No, impossible. Why? Human psychology and the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created the human mind and the way we process grief is that if it did not decrease, we would not be able to function, right? We would not be able to go about our daily lives. We would not be able to go to work. We would not be able to do the day-to-day activities that we do. In order for us to be able to continue in our life, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created the human psychology process of grief in such a way that as time progresses, you slowly start to forget. Not to say that you didn't love the lost one. Not to say that your father doesn't mean as much to you anymore. Of course he does. He was your whole world. But 6 months later, you're not the same. A year later, you won't remember your deceased as much. 2-3 years later, you'll probably hold an Isal Sawab majlis for your father in the mosque. Ask people to come, do a Surah Fatiha, and then go. 10 years later, you probably won't even remember the deceased at all, unless something happens that makes you remember them. But normally, no. So the process is the moment you find out that your loved one has passed away, the way you feel at that moment is completely different to 10 years later how you feel about the exact same individual. This is what we call the normal process of grief. This is what psychologists call the normal process of grief. The question that I would like to start my Muharram series with is, why is it that if this is the normal process, this is the way humans think, why is it that when it comes to Aba Abdullah al-Hussain, everything is the other way around? Why is it that when it comes to Aba Abdullah al-Hussain, the grief increases as the years progress? 1400 years have passed when the grandson of the Prophet was brutally massacred on the plains of Karbala on the day of Ashura. 1444 years later, we are sitting here today remembering Aba Abdullah more and more. Never have you ever seen one Muharram commemoration of the holy personality decrease the next year. It only increases. More and more people come to the mosque. More and more people come to remember Imam al-Hussain. More and more people hold jaluses. More and more people commemorate him. More and more people come to the mosque and do matam and azadari in order to remember Aba Abdullah al-Hussain. The question that we pose tonight, why is it that when it comes to your own loved one, Imam al-Hussain, someone that you've never met, Imam Hussain, someone that you've never talked to, Imam Hussain, someone that you've never conversed with, Imam Hussain, someone you've never even seen, you've just heard that there was a man called Hussain. Who in this room can say they've met Aba Abdullah al-Hussain? No one. You've met your father, you've met your mother. You spent 30, 40, 50 years with your parents. But when they die, your grief decreases. But when Aba Abdullah al-Hussain's grief begins, it only increases.